I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Meredith Barges, who will be sharing Bird-Friendly Building Policy, a look at new U.S. city and state laws.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. I feel like, we have an interesting lineup of presentations today. A lot of stories of declines and heartbreaking scenarios, but I feel like with the bird-friendly building policy, there's actually a lot of hope here and there's a lot of solutions, at least with regard to window collisions, which is really what bird-friendly building is about. It has two aspects of it. Is to decrease the collisions that mostly actually migratory birds and songbirds, mostly forest-dwelling passerines, experience window collisions. And so it's both a way to treat the glass to prevent collisions and also light pollution at buildings. Those are the two kind of areas of bird-friendly building. Just as we get started. So I'm the co-chair of Lights Out Connecticut, and last year I was a policy researcher at the Yale Bird-Friendly Building Initiative, and I was doing policy research on bird-friendly buildings in different cities across the United States. This is the final report that just came out in August. So in this talk, I'm going to be going over what our 10 main findings are, so that other municipalities can be inspired and can be informed by the experiences in different cities in the United States. And it was published by the American Bird Conservancy, which is the leading group on bird collisions in the United States, and the Yale Law School. So our goals for the study were to highlight examples of municipalities that have passed bird-friendly building laws, to analyze those laws to see how do they compare with each other, and then also to inform and inspire new efforts. Really, our goal that we stated from the beginning was to accelerate the adoption of bird-friendly building policies. Now, the context is that more than 20 cities and states across the United States have adopted bird-friendly building policies since 2011. The first was San Francisco, and since then, at least 20 have, and then there's even more states that have, and so it's really a growing movement, and I'm going to talk about that more later. We also were funded by Yale, and there was not yet a study on bird-friendly building policies. And our methodology, we did interviews with different experts. We wrote 5 case studies. I was the lead author, and then we did policy analysis. We were really looking at the laws. So the 5 case studies that we chose are San Francisco and Cupertino. You can see them over on the Pacific Flyway area. San Francisco, like I said, was the first bird-friendly building law passed in the United States in 2011. It regulated 2 things. First is lighting, which has been known to be a contributor to collisions for at least since the 1990s. What happens is excessive light pollution draws birds into areas where they normally wouldn't be. So it draws them closer to buildings where then they are susceptible to bird collisions. They can also, in some instances, mistake light on the horizon coming from buildings and crash directly in at nighttime. But most bird collisions actually happen in the early morning time when birds wake up and then they start to forage. Then they mistake reflections on the glass for habitat and they crash into windows. So it's sort of like a 1-2. The light pollution attracts the birds, the glass kills them. But you can still have, so really when you reduce the light pollution, you reduce the collisions, and there's different thinking about how to reduce the collisions, but since the beginning, they've been addressed together. So in San Francisco, we looked at Cupertino, which is the headquarters of Apple, the Apple company, and they passed their law in 2019, and that's also regulates for glass and light. Madison, Wisconsin, which is the only purple state that has a law. You can see these are pretty much blue states, progressive cities like San Francisco, New York, and Arlington County. But Madison, it's a progressive state, a progressive city within a purple state. And it's the only bird-friendly building that has ever been challenged with a legal a case by a very conservative law firm called Will, which was also trying to allow for hunting of endangered wolves, and they're against transgender bathrooms. It's like this very conservative law firm that challenged the bird-friendly building law there, and it survived. The judge found in favor of the city that the city does have the right to regulate its buildings, to mandate for different kinds of glass treatments to prevent bird collisions. And that was led by the Madison Audubon Society. Arlington County, which, you know, it's right across from DC, and they're a unique one because they integrated their bird-friendly building policy into their green building policy. And it's an incentive program. So buildings that want to build in Madison and have higher density than what's average, then they have to abide by a set of sort of sustainability requirements. And so under those, in the beginning, they made it like a higher tier, like if you want more density, follow bird friendly. And then the following year, they made it mandatory for all buildings that participate in their bonus density program that they have to have bird friendly buildings. So all large buildings in Arlington County that are newly constructed will have to have bird friendly building followed designs. And then the final one that we did is New York City, which has at the time was the gold standard of bird friendly building. It had the highest height threshold. And sorry, there's so much to say here, so I'm just going to try to cover it all. But the thing is that there's different levels of the height that the policy will require be treated for the glass. And the lowest that we found was in Madison, which was 36 feet. They only wanted the first 36 feet of the building treated. But in New York City, they had the highest at the time in the country, which is 70 feet. And you'll notice that that range, it actually is, it copies the tree canopy. Basically, the idea is that the birds mainly hit where they're foraging at tree height. So if you're gonna treat a building, you want to treat the most susceptible parts of the building, which are where the birds are flying, which is the tree canopy, because these are mostly, like I said, forest dwelling birds that are affected by collisions. So those are the 5 case studies that we did. So just to back up a little bit, what is a bird-friendly building policy? Now, it can be a law, which can be passed by like an ordinance, a city council, or a county council. It can be an incentive program like it was in Arlington County or in Toronto, Canada, which passed the very first bird-friendly building law in North America. And they built it into their Toronto Green Standard. So that didn't follow a legislative process. That was a program that the city decided to adopt and regulated through kind of like their development plan. And the final one can be a general policy. For instance, the state of Wisconsin put a law in place, I think it was in 2020, that said that all new state-owned buildings from then on had to be built with bird-friendly building materials. So all new Wisconsin buildings have to have bird-friendly glass. And that was just written into a code. And so it didn't follow a legislative process. It didn't follow a planning process. It's just a state decision. And as I said, the bird-friendly building includes at least 2 features. Mainly it's glass on the exterior facade of the building, because that's what creates that hazard that birds can crash into, and then nighttime lights. And then a little bit landscaping, but landscaping isn't usually regulated. It can be introduced as a component of it, but it's always regulating glazing or glass and lighting, nighttime lighting, interior and exterior. So I just want to say, bird-friendly buildings are diverse and beautiful. You can take a look at a few examples here. What you can see at the Brooklyn Botanical Garden is that they've introduced vertical lines, and that creates what they call a visual noise. The birds know that they can't fly through that. And this is an award-winning building. It's a beautiful example of bird-friendly building. You've got something more like biophilic, and then here's a set of screens that are put over in front of a glass, and here they've introduced some interesting artwork. So it doesn't just have to be lines and dots. It can really be art and be very inventive. So one of our key findings is that cities and counties, in the absence of federal action, is that they're really accelerating adoption of bird-friendly building and bird-friendly design. So I just want to back up a moment. Why do birds collide with buildings? The main 2 reasons are that glass, first of all, is transparent, so it creates what's called a fly through condition, where birds think that they can fly through to whatever that, in this case, there's actually a courtyard here, a habitat that's inside. So they'll collide with the glass because the reflection, because they think that they can, reach that other destination. Here, the problem is that the reflective glass is reflecting habitat, so they'll fly thinking that they can reach, vegetation or another bird or whatever it might be, trying to get away from a predator. So those are the two main ways that glass becomes lethal for birds. And most of the times if birds crash, they do die pretty instantly. There's some birds that can survive, but there's some evidence that they die later on from brain bleeds and things. So the other role that contributes to these bird collisions and bird mortalities is the light pollution. And you can see here, if you were actually to map the avian fly routes in North America onto this map, you'd see that basically we've built all of our biggest cities right along the Atlantic Flyway. Here's the Mississippi Flyway, and then the Pacific Flyway is where all like Los Angeles and San Francisco are. And so the birds are really having to contend with a lot of light that's in the nighttime environment that they have not evolved to see. Actually, birds, we've got 722 bird species in North America. 3/4 of them migrate. And that can also be like a little bit of micro migrations. And then of these, 80% are migrating at nighttime. So all the warblers and the vireos, kingfishers, and they're basically, while we're asleep at night, they're flying across the sky using the moon, the setting sun, the rising sun as cues in the environment of where they're going. And so when there's all this light pollution, it distracts them and it lures them into dangerous areas. So the thing is that it's a shocking number, but they're estimating that up to or even around 1 billion birds are killed every year in the United States from building collisions. It's the second leading cause of bird mortality after feral cats or outdoor cats. So I just want to talk about a little bit about what are bird-friendly building materials. Here we have a great example of some glass that's been treated. This is the very simple design. It was one of the earliest forms of bird-friendly building glass, where they just put dots or markers so that birds will be able to see where that there's a barrier there, so they won't try to fly through. And the spacing there should be 2 inches by 2 inches for the hummingbirds and chimney swifts and things like that. And then here's a really interesting one. This is more dynamic biophilic design. It's just breaking up the glass so that obviously the birds won't try to fly through. And here's when you can see the stratified glass. It's on surface 1, which means the exterior, and that will make it so that birds will be less tempted to. But even with all this treatment, it's only about 90% at maximum effective in preventing bird collisions if the glass is treated. The other solution is to dim the lights. And for those of you who are less familiar, there's a movement called Dark Sky International. They're a huge partner for us at Lights Out Connecticut. And this is a dark sky town in Wales. And what they've done is used a series of reducing the amount of light and the color temperatures, using timers and different things to reduce the amount of light in this town. You can see the before and afters. You can see the warm temperature of this light, and there's less before and after. They're turning off interior lights. And I find it very soothing to see those nighttime, the afters. Like, I really want to visit this place in Wales. The other interesting thing that came out was that in 2021, a study at McCormick Place in Chicago found that when they turned off 50% of interior lights at this building, they were able to reduce the collisions at the building by 60%. Now, this is a very high collision building. It's an all glass. It's the country's largest convention center that's sited right on Lake Michigan. So when the birds are coming across Lake Michigan, they see the lights in the building, they don't recognize the glass, and they smash into McCormick Place. But in this study that they did, they found if they turn off the lights, they can reduce the collisions by 60%. That's at least one step towards reducing the collisions. Another solution is that in Connecticut, just last year, I was part of a movement to pass this new law It's Public Act 143, which requires that all state-owned buildings in Connecticut have to dim their lights from 11 p.m. at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. Those are non-essential exterior lights at all state-owned buildings. So that's like courthouses, DMVs, where they park the buses. And this is estimated that it will save the state of Connecticut $1.5 million a year. And because of that, it got massive bipartisan support. We had 35 co-sponsors for the bill. And I just want to point out one thing. The bill says that it wants to turn off lights not for decarbonization purposes, but for the protection of birds. This is a bird-friendly building policy, the only one in the state of, that's the only one in New England. Some bird-friendly building policies are more comprehensive than others. We found when we compared them side by side, we found that they have different definitions of what is bird-friendly. They have different rules about which structures are covered. Some, like in Madison, they only regulate buildings that are large, over 10,000 square feet. And then how much of this structure needs to be treated, like how much of the first, first 36 feet, first 100 feet. And we also found that they share a lot of the same limitations. Almost all of them exempt residential single-family homes, even though it's known that at least 40% of collisions occur at people's homes. They also exempt storefronts for commercial reasons. They think that having the glass will decrease businesses, even though people don't want to shop in a place where birds are crashing into the window. And then they also set low height thresholds, and they, in some cases, restrict only to certain areas that they call bird sensitive. But I will say, again, the key finding is that so many of the policymakers that we spoke to said that they were motivated by that 2019 Science Journal study that found that we've lost 1 in 4 birds from the landscape. They said over and over again that that was a huge motivator for why they knew there was an urgent need to act. And since 2019, there was already sort of an increasing trajectory for these, but this is the number of policies passed per year since it's actually Cook County passed one, but it's not really counted. The first city is 2011 in San Francisco. And then there was a huge bump. See this year, huge bump in the number. And then there's already a few that have been passed. There was just one passed in New Jersey, I think last week. So, and this was actually a dip, I think because of the pandemic, frankly. There were some bird-friendly building policies passed during the pandemic, but they were working, over Zoom and things. So this number is only going to go up. I think with progressive cities are going to understand this is the new standards that no one wants to work or live in a building that kills birds. Now, the most often reasons for opposition to bird-friendly building is they say it costs too much to buy the glass that has the treatments. But if bird-friendly building is considered from the design phase, it can cost the same as or less than, because a very easy strategy is to reduce the amount of glass at a building, or you can introduce screens, you can use exterior shades. There's all sorts of things that you can do besides buy expensive, glass from Germany. Another one is the aesthetics. They'll say that it's ugly to have bird-friendly buildings, but as I showed you before, bird-friendly buildings can be actually quite beautiful. But we're living in a context right now where glass is sort of like the hallmark of sophistication, of the future. Everyone wants to be in these glassy. This is the Apple Visitor Center in Cupertino, and this is the Amazon projected new headquarters in Arlington County. And there's just so much glass everywhere, and you can only imagine with the number of glassy buildings that have gone up, what the hazards are going to be for birds if this design aesthetic continues. Now, I don't find it attractive. I look at that and I think bird collisions. Sorry, I have so much to say. I'm just talking really fast here. The challenge is existing buildings. All of those bird-friendly building policies that I mentioned before, they mostly all, I think in every case in fact, except for the lighting rules where all the state buildings, which are existing buildings, otherwise they only regulate new construction and major retrofits. And we know that by 2050, 80% of today's building stock are still going to be there. And then you have really problematic buildings like McCormick Place, where the 1,000 birds crashed back in October. And those are all the birds, mostly migratory birds. So I just want to say the other finding is that nobody wants to live, work, die, and study, and worship it. And the surprise one was to own. even the most unscrupulous developers, no one wants to own a building where birds are dying. And we're seeing that in different contexts, that they're willing to take some steps to reduce collisions. And that's what's happened at McCormick Place is after this massive tragedy in October is they've committed now that at least during the migration period, they'll turn off all the lights and they're going to start pursuing a way to mitigate the glass. Key finding 9 is that bird-friendly design can be successfully integrated into different carbon savings, like green building policies. We found over and over again that the cities that were adopting bird-friendly building rules were doing so in combination with their sustainability measures. So they were adopting green roofs plus bird-friendly, or energy efficient lighting plus bird-friendly. So it goes hand in hand with green building. And the final one is that we need imaginative building policy and design solutions to save birds. We need people's ideas to try to capture the existing buildings, to try to make bird-friendly building, to engineer new products. So we really need to continue to widen the marketplace. And the final thing is that we need the recognition that birds have a right to exist. And I think this ties in really well with this morning's talk, is that we need to change people's hearts about caring of the role of birds in the ecosystem, of our relationship to birds, and that again, nobody wants to live or work in a building that where hundreds of birds were dying. So what makes a building beautiful? What makes a building sustainable? Like you could be LEED rated and have a fully glass building. But I ask, can a building be beautiful or sustainable if it kills birds?